I'm making a rhythm game in the style of the Rhythm Heaven series, but with more of a story. I've been messing around with character models and prototyping and all that, but I think it's finally time to put the rhythm in Rhythm Game. For the first rhythm game, I want the robot to be doing whatever it was originally built for before it gained sentience. It should seem like a menial task, but still be fun enough as a game. It also needs to be pretty simple since it's the first one. A while back, I went through every Rhythm Heaven style game and made up categories for them. Pretty much all of the first games are what I would categorize as basic, a sound and visual plays indicating that you should press a button a set amount of beats later. Sometimes there's also a second cue that changes the timing, button, or amount of presses. I decided to stick with the formula and make my first game also fit the basic category. I settled on the robot being a machine that crushes things as they move down a conveyor belt. The crushing will make for a good percussive sound, and the conveyor belt will make for cues that are similar to the more Guitar Hero style. That way, players who are only familiar with that kind of rhythm game can be eased into things. The two different cues will be cubes and spheres appearing on the conveyor belt. Cubes sit on the conveyor belt and take 4 beats to reach the crusher, but spheres roll and therefore only take 2 beats. Right now they're literally just those shapes, but if I come up with a story reason for the robot to be crushing more specific things, I can pretty easily just change the texturing to match. Once I got the idea down, I needed a song to use while testing. I wanted the final song to sound kinda like that Phineas and Ferb song that goes dee-da-da-dee-da-da-dee-da-da. So for the test song, I took the first part of that song, made a quick version of it in FL Studio, and changed the instrumentation to be vaguely factory-like. Next I messed around with a pan for a bit to get a bunch of sounds I could mix together for the machinery. I added a bunch of reverb to them to make them sound larger. Then I blocked out a basic scene in Blender to get started on the code. The actual implementation was fairly uneventful, since so much of the code is reused from my test game. I did have to figure out how to get the objects to move at the correct speed along the conveyor's path though. I settled on adding invisible copies of the objects to points where they need to change rotation or direction, and using those to calculate where the object needs to be at any given point in time. I also had the objects swap out for various squished versions based on how accurate the timing of the hit was. At this point, I decided to have my partner play the game to get someone else's feedback on it. It turns out I didn't even have to wait for her to talk to know it wasn't good. I'll recreate the situation, and let's see if you can tell what made me feel like a failure. Did you find it? It's the fact that she stopped taking the game seriously and just started key mashing so quickly. If I can't even keep my girlfriend's attention, I have no hope of getting people to play hours of this game. She said it was because of how far apart the cues were, but I didn't want them to overlap too often because that could add too much difficulty to what was supposed to be basically a tutorial. After some thinking, I realized that the cue for the cubes was too long. With 4 beats in between, most of them ended up taking up 2 whole measures, so by shortening that to 3, I could double the amount of inputs for the slowest part of the song. I had to reconfigure quite a bit of the song to account for the new timing, but I ended up really liking the changes. The Rhythm Heaven community makes a lot of custom remixes, which are basically existing songs placed into Rhythm Heaven games. I always feel like there's something lacking with these, though. The original songs were designed from the ground up to include the game's sounds and cues, whereas the custom remix songs were complete on their own and now have extra sounds added on top. If you play any Rhythm Heaven game and then listen to its song on the soundtrack, in some cases the song will be almost unrecognizable. That's because the cues are treated as their own instrument. That way, when you're playing well, it sounds like you're actually contributing to the song instead of just tapping to the beat of it. Because of this, while writing the song, I included the cues and hit sounds in the timeline so I could make them fit in perfectly with the song. But first I made a simple bass line based on the one from the Phineas and Ferb song, along with a little melody to go on top of it. The scene was looking kind of ugly, so I adjusted the textures and added some more factory stuff. Plus, now when anything gets to the end of the conveyor, it turns into a physics object and actually falls down. I wanted to represent the passage of time in the song, so halfway through, everything gets covered in rust and dust and the song starts sounding a bit off. I used Godot's shader graph to make some materials with controllable rust levels, and used shape keys in Blender to make this poster start peeling up. Hey guys, Future Nora here. I finished the rest of this video in like early January, but I've been on the run from the time police for the past 2 months. I think I finally lost them, but I just realized that this game isn't as good as I want it to be. I'm just gonna fix it real quick and hope I don't disrupt the time stream enough for them to find me. First up is the visuals. It's pretty clear that the room is just a cube, which makes the whole thing look less interesting, so let's add some pillars to the wall. The whole floor area is kinda bland, so let's just delete the floor and have everything be on platforms. Now there's a lot more visual interest, but we can still use some design theory to improve it further. We can adjust the colors to de-emphasize the background elements and make the important parts stand out more. The words on this poster also draw unnecessary attention and don't really fit with the cartoony style, so we can replace the letters with blobs to make it blend in with the background. Now for the music. I think I had too many conflicting ideas for how I wanted the song to sound, which made the quality suffer. This time around, I focused purely on making sure the rhythm emphasized every hit. I included the same deterioration thing in this one, but when testing, I realized that the idea didn't really come across that well, so I switched it out with just having the visuals degrade over time, and keeping the song normal until a slowdown at the very end. That way it still communicates the passage of time, with less risk of people thinking the song was just worse in the last half for some reason. I like this version of the song a lot better, but I still might end up changing it later as I get better at music production. Okay, back to past Nora. And yeah, that's about it. You can play this right now, by the way. I wasn't going to post a demo until the milestone I mentioned last time, but I really want some feedback on this, so there's an itch.io link in the description. Try it out and leave a comment on what I could improve. Itch has a comment section, but I'd prefer if you commented on the video for engagement or whatever. Maybe both? I'd definitely see it if you did both. Also, like and subscribe while you're at it. Then you'll see the next update and can know if I fixed the parts you didn't like.